There's a certain sound my phone makes when there's a warning of severe weather, and it most definitely gets my attention. I get that same sense as I read 2 Timothy 3 1 through 5. There's a warning here that we need to pay close attention to. It says, "But realize this, that in the last days difficult times will come. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, slanderers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power. Avoid such people as these." This passage warns us that in the last days, which is the period of time we're living in now, difficult times will come. Some of these difficulties will be brought on by a certain type of people, people that we should avoid. With the description given, you would think it would be pretty easy to quickly recognize these people. But I'm not so sure, because as verse 5 says, they hold to a form of godliness. The Greek word for form in this verse is morphosis. Vine's dictionary defines it as a form or outline, denotes in the New Testament an image or impress, an outward semblance. So they don't have real godliness, just a form or outline of it, an outward appearance of it. To anyone on the outside looking in, it may look like the real thing, a form of godliness, but not true godliness. What is true godliness? Godliness, in the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, is defined as piety toward God and the proper conduct that springs from a right relationship with Him. It goes on to say that it is the sum total of religious character and actions. It is not right action that is done from a sense of duty, but is the spontaneous virtue that comes from the indwelling Christ and reflects Him. Godliness involves being devoted to God and doing what He says is right. Is it possible to look on the outside like you're devoted to God and doing what He commands? Absolutely. But true godliness goes deeper than that. This devotion and right actions come as a product of a right relationship with God. Religion can be manufactured. A right relationship cannot. The outward appearance may be very similar at times between someone with true godliness and someone with just a form of it, but the inside is completely different. Verse 5 says, "Holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power." These people are trying to keep up the appearance of godliness, but aren't allowing God's power to actually change them. The Greek word translated as power in this verse is dunamis. This is probably one of my favorite Greek words. This word is the root of the word dynamic. Every time I hear it, it reminds me of the effect of the power of God living in Christians. Because the definition of dynamic is a force that stimulates change or progress. As Christians, we have this dynamic power producing a change in us, little by little, improving us, transforming us, shaping and molding us to be more like Jesus. These people that 2 Timothy chapter 3 warns us against don't have this power because, as verse 5 says, they have denied it. This word in the Greek is arneomai. Strong says it means contradict. This is the same Greek word used in Titus 1:16, which says, "They profess to know God, but by their deeds they deny him, being detestable and disobedient and worthless for any good deed." They profess to know God, but their deeds contradict that statement. They say the right words, but their hearts don't match up. 1 Corinthians 4:20 says, "For the kingdom of God is not in words, but in power." In Matthew chapter 23, Jesus speaks very firmly to the religious leaders that are doing exactly this, holding to a form of godliness but denying its power. Verses 1 through 5a say, Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. Therefore, whatever they tell you, do and comply with it all. But do not do as they do, for they say things and do not do them. And they tie up heavy burdens and lay them on people's shoulders. But they themselves are unwilling to move them with so much as their finger, and they do all their deeds to be noticed by other people. Then, skipping down a little bit to verses 25 through 28, Jesus says, Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside they are full of robbery and self indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and of the dish, so that the outside of it may also become clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So you too outwardly appear righteous to people, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. In verse 27, Jesus refers to the religious leaders that are doing this as whitewashed tombs. And in verse 28 says, So you too outwardly appear righteous to people, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. They look good at first glance, but as you look closer, you can see something completely different. 6 times in this chapter alone, Jesus calls them hypocrites. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! The Greek word is hypokrites, which Strong defines as an actor under an assumed character, stage player, someone pretending to be someone they are not. These are the same kind of people God speaks about in Isaiah 29:13. Then the Lord said, Because this people approaches me with their words and honors me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me, and their reverence for me consists of the commandment of men that is taught. They say the right things, but their hearts don't match up. Their hearts and words contradict each other. In Matthew 7, Jesus says, Beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? So every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, you will know them by their fruits. Jesus says, Beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. They come acting innocent and harmless, but are malicious and destructive. How can you tell a false prophet from a real one? How can you tell a hypocrite from a true believer? How can you tell if someone has the true power of God living in them, or if they are holding to a form of godliness? Jesus says here in verse 16, You will know them by their fruits. I see 3 types of plants here: the kind that doesn't bear fruit, like thorn bushes and thistles, the kind that bears bad fruit, like bad trees, and then we have the good trees that bear good fruit. And there's no deviation from this. Jesus even says, a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Someone who is holding to a form of godliness and yet denying God's power is incapable of bearing good fruit. The passage we looked at the beginning lists some of the bad fruit they will bear. It says, For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, slanderers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. True believers will love God and others more than themselves. True believers will want to obey God and display the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control. True believers will want to draw people to God, not to themselves. True believers will sacrifice for others, will care about the lost, and will serve with humility. This doesn't mean that a true believer will be perfect in all of this, but there is a big difference between a struggling Christian and the type of people the Bible is warning us about. It is possible for a true believer to go through a short season of not bearing fruit, but in due season they will bear fruit again. The Pharisees' outward actions were not fruit of inward change through the power of God. They were only for show. Inside, their hearts were rotten. Their words and actions contradicted what was really in their hearts. We need to be careful to avoid this kind of person, and especially careful that we are not this person.